it felt like a pertinent kind of time to bring in a few ways that we can help ourselves stay centered. And one of the ways that has been really showing up for me in what I've been observing and what I've been experiencing in myself and in others is in the use of languaging. So the words that we choose to use when we are trying to explain something or convey something or describe something can have a great impact on how that something is received and then what is then done about it. So certain words, or a lot of words, will have a certain kind of trigger to them. Then there's semantics involved, which goes beyond the definition of the word and into the meaning of the word, which can change from person to person. So while it's impossible to kind of guess another person's trigger words or how they feel about a word without actually knowing that, all we can do is try our best, but also understand the languaging that we're using for ourselves. So one thing is being aware of the languaging and what words are being used to trigger things like fear and stress, rather than conveying the actual point and conveying what we actually need to do about it, which is very, very important. But when there's words like catastrophic, for example, that leads to fear-based responses and fear-based triggers. And the issue with fear and stress in these responses is that those things lower our immune response. They increase experiences of anxiety and depression, and that is never a positive thing. And it creates incoherence. So we're less able to, or the receiver is less able to make sound decisions, and less able to absorb the facts that we actually need when that fear and stress response has been triggered. So having an idea and being able to recognize that recognize the languaging being used and identify that as what it is. And then when you're able to identify it, it lessens that trigger. It may still be there, but what it then does is we can actually observe it and go, okay, well, that's actually the trigger. Then we can look underneath it and go, what's the actual information I need? And that is really, really important as well, because there is so much important information that we need to know right now. And it is a time of uncertainty. We don't know how this pandemic is going to eventuate. We don't know the impact, but we do know what we need to do now based on the scientific calculations of what might happen if we don't versus what might happen if we do. We can only do our best based on that, but we need to be able to see and receive that information first without being in that triggered and stress response. And the other thing that happens when we have that incoherency within us is we focus on what's not important. So you've seen it in the shops, for example. And yeah, it's important to have things on hand and available, but you've seen the mass response that can happen there. And that is really dangerous, because then it just creates more panic, and panic begets panic. And then from there, it just becomes this spiral when the information that we need to know is still sitting there wanting our attention, but it's been overshadowed by all of these emotive words and languaging that is getting in the way. So to be mindful at this time, but in all ways, I feel like languaging is really important to be considering. If you run a business and your languaging is very pushy, that's not going to feel good for your customer base, right? It's the same thing if you are able to recognize where languaging is being more manipulative and less facts-based, then you will be able to actually look at what's important and then help others and be more mindful in the languaging you use. And we're never going to get it 100% right because, as I mentioned, we don't know the triggers on the other side of the conversation. We don't know what the other person's feelings around certain words are, and we cannot know all of that. But if we can be mindful and use languaging in a way that isn't manipulative, but is more educational and thoughtful and shows what we need to know rather than describes it in a way that may not paint an accurate picture, then that will go a long way into how we mentally and emotionally recover from this.